Hey everyone, welcome to a Screenwriter's Rant. My name is Tony D. Today we're going to talk about creating a narrative, and again we're going to get a little political. This is going to be more political than it is about screenwriting, so bail now if you want. I totally understand. I am completely sick of politics, but you know, when I started doing these videos, I didn't really want to do anything about politics, but my political ones with Captain Marvel and whatnot got a lot of hits, and a lot of people say I should put my money where my mouth is and make some political videos. So here you go. So this is the way I'm tying it in. The Mueller Report just came out, and everybody's freaking out online. And truth be told, I didn't vote for Trump. I'm a libertarian. I voted for Gary Johnson. So whatever. I wouldn't vote for either Hillary Clinton or Trump when they ran in 2016. I was just like, you're all crazy for voting for either of these idiots. But the thing is, when you look at the Russia-Trump narrative, it really does feel like a narrative to me. Now, why is that? Well, hi, Joan. Come on, coming up. Oh, good job. Almost didn't make it. Joan says hi. So, if you're going to create a narrative to undermine Trump, why Russia collusion? Why? Well, I see it this way. If you're building a narrative, if I'm deconstructing this backwards, the first thing you'd have to do is say to yourself, well, we need to create a narrative that explains a lot of things. The first thing we need to do is we need to get at Trump, because they wanted to undermine him, let's be honest, and they want to set themselves up for the next election. So under that guise, and using what they know about previous history, an investigation type scenario was likely. They did the same thing to Bill Clinton, right? Kenneth Starr, and the investigation went on and on and on and on. And nothing ever came of it, really. I mean, it was just a bunch of senators and representatives on the TV, and footage of Clinton and people reporting breathlessly about it. It was very similar to Trump, except that, in the 90s when Clinton was president, news wasn't so all-encompassing. There was news, and then there were other things. Now it just seems like everything's news. Everything's political. Everything's news. So that's part of the reason for the magnification. But why Russia? Why, of all countries, Russia? So, why not Iran? Why not Syria? Why not any other country in the world? Why not China? Well, I think they picked Russia for a couple of reasons. Because, number one, the Russians were already under sanctions. They were already in the doghouse with the Obama administration over what happened in Syria. We were looking to maybe bomb Syria during the Obama administration. Putin kind of embarrassed Obama by coming out publicly and questioning, the reasons for doing that, basically saying he wouldn't support the bombing of Syria. And then a lot of people looked at that as an embarrassment to Obama, that he was getting schooled by another government leader. So they didn't have a great relationship. And Obama, as president, as a Democratic president, was very much the head of the Democratic Party, because that's basically what happens when you're president. You're also sort of the head of the party at that point, because everything funnels up to you at that point. Because it's all about, once you get elected, once you're the nominee, it's all about getting you elected. And then once you're elected, it's all about getting reelected. So you know, they needed to pick a country with the means, and 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 China qualifies, but China really wasn't under sanctions, and you know, China didn't have uh, the they didn't have the connection to Syria. They could have been the villain. They could have been the villain in the scenario. But the thing was, Trump had already said during the campaign that he would get along with Putin. He didn't really say that about China. You know, he didn't really make any noise. He specifically made noise about Putin, and Hillary went after him for that, which was interesting too, because Hillary has her own ties to Russia via the Obama administration because they sold 20% of the uranium in the United States to the Russians because they needed it for their nuclear power plants and whatnot. So there's some ties there. And another reason is, if you've ever read any Machiavelli, when he wrote The Prince, he wrote all these things you would do in politics, like all the tools, all the ruthless, amoral tools you could use. And one of them was to accuse your rivals of that of which you're guilty. So if you do that, it does two things. Number one, it puts them on the defensive. And number two, even if they prove themselves innocent, when they turn around and accuse you of what you actually did, they look very hollow and petty and bitter. So now that stuff's coming out about the Ukraine and Hillary, and I assume some Russia stuff will eventually come out, it'll just look like, well, Trump's just angry and nobody will believe it. So it undermines their whole deal. So the next question we ask as screenwriters, when you're a journalist, you ask, who benefits? And cops ask that too, who benefits? But as screenwriters, we ask, who's the audience? So who's the audience for this narrative? Trump, Russia. It's the voters. They're always the audience for this kind of stuff. They're always the audience for the Republicans and Democrats, because politics, especially in the U.S., is very much a dog and pony show. So this is a presentation, and it's about putting on the show long enough for people to believe it and for the other side to just kind of give up, right? The other side just gets so sick of the narrative that they just go, okay, all right, look, let's just put this aside, or to get them to make a mistake. Now, like, a mistake would have been for Trump to lower the hammer down and fire everybody, because then the Democrats could have said, well, of course he's guilty. He fired everybody, didn't he? But he didn't, which indicates to me he's acting like an innocent guy. Because what kind of guilty guy would want the Mueller report completely unredacted released to the public? I mean, that's what he's asking. He's the White House is like, yeah, release the report, let everybody see it. That's a guy who's innocent and knows he's innocent, at least of the stuff in the report and at least collusion. And he said over and over again, oh, it's a witch hunt, I never did, blah, blah, blah. If you were guilty, you wouldn't just say, I'm completely innocent. You would lay the groundwork of why, whatever you were guilty of might be a feasible or legal thing to do. So if Trump had talked to the Russians, or one of his guys had talked to the Russians, or more importantly, one of his family had talked to the Russians in any kind of serious way, he'd be laying the groundwork for some kind of defense on that. So that when it came out, it would be like, well, I told you it was perfectly legal because of X, Y, and Z. And we all knew that. But he's not. He just keeps saying, it's a witch hunt. I'm not involved in collusion. Now that doesn't mean he's completely innocent of everything, but sounds to me that from if I was writing this character, that's the kind of behavior, to play a character at the height of his intelligence. That's exactly what I would do. Even if you're a liar, even liars know that if you're innocent, you want to play that up as much as possible. Because if someone thinks you're guilty of something you know you didn't do, and something you know there's no evidence of, you can make your opponent look 1,000 times worse. Because you're just getting hammered and hammered and hammered by these accusations, which you know are false. All you have to do is wait for the evidence to come out. And then it completely undermines the credibility of your rival, and then they'll never be able to do anything about anything you do ever again. I mean, think about this. Trump's going to walk away completely vindicated from this report, the way it looks now. So what are they going to ever get him for then? If they go after him again, people are just going to go, oh, come on. No, come on. I'm talking, of course, normal people. I'm not talking, of course, the hardcore believers who are watching, say, MSNBC. But, so that's how I see the narrative being crafted in this whole Russia nonsense. And you can argue that, well, maybe Mueller crafted a narrative. He very well did. I mean, that's what these guys do in an investigation. You investigate something and then you craft a narrative about your theories on what actually happened. So I'm sure you're going to get some sort of, narrative from Mueller about the various aspects of the case. But, if anybody was truly guilty, first off, what that would it would get the Democrats something, but they would be vindicated and then coast, I guess, into a 2020 election. But if they're not and they double down on this, why are they then now laying the groundwork? Well, impeachment's off the table, it seems. I think it's because they probably, if they didn't know in advance, they certainly knew by the time the report came out that Mueller was going to not indict anybody. I said about a week ago, Trump's already got this report. He already knows. They all have. You can't be in that level of government and not have contacts, not have people in the know, And if it's not Trump personally, it's someone in his staff who knows someone else who knows someone else who got the word. So, I mean, think about your own situation, your own workplace. If you work in a corporate environment, you probably know a few things you shouldn't know, depending on how high up you are. And, when rumors swirl, and some of them are rumors, some of them are total BS, but a lot of it's not. A lot of it's just people like to talk. And they can't keep their mouth shut, even when things are classified, even when your boss tells you, do not tell anyone. In fact, for some people, you tell them, do not tell anybody, you're going to blab it to everybody. They can't help themselves. It's just human nature. Now, do I think Trump is innocent or guilty? I definitely don't think he colluded with Russia for a lot of different reasons. For one thing, Russia is a second-rate power with the GDP of Spain. So, you can look up all the GDPs in the world. Spain's pretty far down there. And the Russian overhead is pretty high. They've got an old infrastructure. They used to be a superpower. They got nukes all over the place. They got an insanely huge army as compared to the rest of the world. They spend the second most money on, their army. We spend the most, but we outspend them by 10 times. So we probably spend our new budget's like $750 billion. So they're blowing at least $75 billion on their military. That's a lot of money for a second-rate power like Russia that's under sanctions. It just is. I mean, they just don't have the kind of money we do. Now, they have more money than, say, the Soviet Union. They have a better economy because they're not under communism, but, you know, they're certainly economically, they're a second-rate power. Now, China, they got a little bit of money. India, they got a little bit of money. So if you told me, like, there was a country that was going to bribe Donald Trump, my first thought wouldn't be Russia. I mean, probably the top of that list would be China, India. Geez, that's about it. I mean, maybe Germany. Maybe Germany. Germany has some money. But even those countries don't compare to the United States. And he's president. And even if he didn't get elected president, he was going to write a book, launch a news channel, probably do a whole new TV show about it, do the talk show circuit. He would have been raking it in doing that. And he was very practiced at doing that kind of stuff. So, and he has hundreds of millions of dollars. He's a billionaire. Now, some argue, well, he doesn't have $1 billion. Okay, he has hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a lot of money. So, how much money are the Russians really going to dump on a guy who they didn't think was going to win the election either? I mean, Donald Trump didn't think he was going to win the election. Nobody did. Up until about 2 weeks and maybe 10 days before the election started, the polls had Hillary in a landslide. People laughed at Ann Coulter when she went on Bill Maher's show and said she called it for Trump. I mean, come on. No one thought Trump was going to win. I certainly didn't. I watched the election results while I was writing some comedy or something, and I thought, well, let's see when Hillary wins. I was as shocked as everybody else. Everybody was shocked. Trump was shocked, and there's evidence to suggest that he didn't have any intention of being president. He wasn't ready. He didn't pick. He didn't have his staff ready. He still has vacancies in the staff. He never filled them. Is that a guy that sounds to you like he was ready to be president? That not to me. Hillary Clinton had all those jobs ready and lined up. Oh, she had a whole spreadsheet of people. I guarantee you. She thought she was going to be president up until about, I don't know, a few days before maybe? I mean, seriously. What? And what did the Russians do to get him elected? Okay, you're going to tell me they fund WikiLeaks, and I don't believe that. I'm a fan of WikiLeaks. I think they do a good job. They did a good job against the Bush administration. This idea that they're fronted by the Russians. No, they've put out stuff about the Russians. No one in this country gives a crap about that because the politics in the world of Russia, I mean, it's akin to their country. Like, it's not anything earth-shattering either. It's just the usual corruption that you see in other countries. So they've done it. So, let's say, okay, if I grant you like WikiLeaks, they work for the Russians, let's say. Does that mean the emails were fake? John Podesta, he still has a copy of his emails. He could come out and say, these emails are fake. I didn't say that. He hasn't done it. He could potentially go through and change the emails and try to say that WikiLeaks lied. But the problem with that is WikiLeaks has the computer code, so they know they're authentic. Now, you could change that code too, and he could change his emails. But there's a problem with that. It's all the other people who got emails, who sent him emails that are in the WikiLeaks email treasure trove. he would have to change all the codes on all of them as well. And they would have to match, and he would have to hope that the Boston Globe, the LA Times, the New York Times, all these media outlets would also change their code and change their emails and agree with him. And he can't guarantee that. There's too many emails, and the technology doesn't exist just to do it, thank God. So no one's ever come out and said these emails are fake. Therefore, they're legitimate. And if you've ever read them, they're pretty horrifying. They support the notion totally that the DNC rigged its own primary and used its considerable media influence to rig the RNC primary. And they did that by telling all their media contacts, we want the fringe candidates promoted, the three fringe guys, Carson, Cruz, Trump. And when you look at it that way, Trump was a guy who could capitalize on that attention. Carson and Cruz could not. It's as simple as that. And that's why Trump won. And the thinking behind that, the Hillary campaign was, oh, Trump will be easy to beat. Who will vote for Donald Trump? Well, as it turns out, half the country or more. So, when you have a populist message and you have a terrible, terrible candidate as the establishment, people tend to say F you to the establishment, and that's what happened. That Russia was in on it. The Russians, you can argue that Hillary didn't like the Russians. That much is true. She wanted to arm the Ukrainians, and the Russians didn't like that, so they did have a motive, but so do a lot of other countries. The Iranians had a motive too. She was ready to go to war with the Iranians. She said that. WikiLeaks? Sure, they have a motive. She once said she wanted to drone bomb Julian Assange. So, I mean, I don't think WikiLeaks needed Russia's help. They, and all the evidence suggests that WikiLeaks were delivered the email trove on a thumb drive. It wasn't an internet thing. So, you could choose to believe whatever you want, but the evidence is there. I mean, WikiLeaks is there. If you don't trust WikiLeaks, I don't know how you trust places like CNN or MSNBC or ABC News or any of these network guys. These guys really haven't been relevant in terms of journalism in a long time. They haven't exposed anything. They just tend to spout whatever the conventional wisdom is, whatever the government tells them's cool. And, especially someone like MSNBC has a weird history, okay? And people forget that. MSNBC, at one point, they were afraid to put Phil Donahue on their channel because everybody was so keyed up about 9/11. They wanted to balance out conservatives and liberals, and Phil Donahue counted as too conservative, so they had to have an extra conservative on to balance it out. I mean, and then they just decided to rebrand, and he left. And now you got the channel that they have. And that is financially successful for them, but that doesn't mean it's news. That doesn't mean it's valid. And they're the ones mainly pushing this Russia hoax thing now that it's even starting to there's just very little left in it. And if you look at some of the journalists online, I don't know who you watch, but I watch guys like Tim Pool. Even if you watch Jimmy Dore, who's very much a left-leaning guy, he's making fun of Rachel Maddow. He thinks she's gone off the deep end. I don't think she's gone off the deep end. I think she just knows where she's making her money. I'm very, very cynical that way. Again, it's a crafted narrative. The narrative makes her money. She's going to push it until she pushes it right off the cliff. And if she gets fired from MSNBC, the next move will be to just go right to the internet and keep it alive, because that's where all your money is. And if you have a dedicated following online, as little as 10,000 people, you can make a living, because those hardcore, if you have 10,000 followers online, this is a webcomic formula. If you have 10,000 followers online, that means 1,000 followers are hardcore enough that they're going to, support you on Patreon and buy your merch and all that good stuff. And you can make a living, and if you have 100,000, well, then you got 10,000 people buying your merch. And there are plenty of people who are making a living on it on their own. They're making a good living, a comfortable living. And Rachel Maddow could walk off right onto a YouTube channel, all her own, probably be very high end, and she'd probably have at least a few 100,000 followers. At least a few 100,000 people would follow her. Now, the rules are a little different online. She would probably lose followers, but even Bill O'Reilly is slowly rebuilding his audience. He's online and he's still spouting whatever nonsense he's spouting. I think it's nonsense, so I'm not a Bill O'Reilly fan. So, in terms of this whole Mueller report, if you're one of these anti-Trumpers, listen, I get it. You don't like Trump. I know people who don't like Trump. They really don't like Trump. It's fine. It's fine not to like him. It's fine to vote against him. But, if you are sitting up on Twitter and reposting on Facebook and just so sucked down the rabbit hole on this. Look, I've been there. I was there when Bush was president. It was very stressful for me, reading about Bush and the war, and I was very upset about the Iraq war and what was happening to this country at the time. I'm still upset about it, but I don't, I try not to go down a rabbit hole. I keep it in perspective. And you have to live your life. I mean, bad things are going to happen in the world. But, the world is not a spy novel. Trump is not a Russian asset. Trump makes far too much money in the United States for the Russians to be able to bribe him. It's just a matter of math. They just don't have enough money. And let's be honest, you think Trump is a guy they could blackmail? I mean, he's one of the most shameless human beings that walks the face of the earth. What are you going to blackmail him with? He's just going to lie. You got a videotape? It's not me. It's not me. Guy looks like me, but it's not me. That's it. I mean, this is a guy who got caught on tape saying vulgar stuff, which I won't repeat. And, he still got elected president. No one cares. So, do you honestly think, all the crazy stuff he said, do you honestly think, even if the Russians had something to blackmail him with, that he wasn't fully prepared to just go, that's not me. I didn't say that. I don't know what you're talking about. He absolutely was. He would just dismiss the Russians. Are you going to believe the Russians? Who are they? So, and the Russians had to know that too. Are the Russians that stupid? Of all the people to bribe and try to make president, they're going to pick Donald Trump? The guy that, the Russians aren't Americans. I know they probably have their moles here or whatever, but they must have known. They get a lot of their info from TV and the internet too. So just like us, they're looking at the election. Well, Donald Trump ain't going to win. So if they're going to bribe anybody, they could bribe Hillary Clinton. She had the Clinton Foundation through her husband. The Saudis were donating. Seems to me it would make more sense to give the Clinton Foundation $20 million and say, hey, remember us. That to me makes sense. Not that the Russian Federation's got $20 million burning a hole in their pocket, but I'm sure they could have gotten it to her somehow if they really wanted to. But I don't think that was the case. The Clintons are definitely not above a bribe. Let's be honest. So if you were going to bribe anybody, I think you'd bribe the Clintons because they had the infrastructure to accept one, and they're perfectly willing to do it. Donald Trump, who knows? He's already rich. The Clintons are only worth $100 million. Trump's worth way more than that. So you're going to have to pony up a serious amount of dough for the Donald and hope that he still wants more money, or the Clintons who are just, they can't stop, it seems to me. I mean, the Clinton Foundation made a lot of money. And there's a lot of shenanigans going on with that. That, you know, because most of the media wanted Hillary elected, they kind of looked the other way. And let's be honest, the people who run those organizations, they supported Hillary too. I was a communications major. I went to college with a lot of these people who are in positions of power now. They're all very liberal, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it means that they live in a bubble. And they also, you know, there's a comedian who does a bit about how, like, guys, they find their fashion look and then they're just locked in there for the next 20 years. There are a lot of things that people get locked into, and one thing is their politics. Their politics and the perception of politics. They get locked into that. You know, I know people who are older than me who just, you know, they talk about the Democrats like they were 40 years ago. You know, they're just not that way anymore. The Democrats are different. They change. The political parties change over the years. But people get set in their ways. You know, I'm getting older. I'm starting to get set in my ways about certain things. You know, you can see it in people. So it makes sense to me that some people just can't accept it. And those people tend to be older. And then some people just see things differently. They're very partisan. They're very passionate. You know, they're just not going to let this go. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. You know, my hope is if you're a Democrat, my God, let it go. I mean, Donald Trump won. You know, focus on the future. Stop focusing on the past. It's been 2 years. The election's over. You know, you really should be thinking about 2020 at this point. And, you know, good luck. I don't think the Democrats have a shot in hell of winning the next election. But, you know, I definitely think they keep shooting themselves in the foot by going over and over this Russia narrative, you know, and it would do a lot of good to come out and say, we were wrong. We're wrong. We're sorry. We're going to drop that and be done. But that's not going to happen, unfortunately, because that's not the way politics work. They try to play both sides of the issue. Yeah, impeachment's off the table, but they don't really say that they're totally done with it. We're going to have these hearings, but yeah, no, it's not another investigation. Yeah, we're moving on, but you know, we got to investigate things. So that way they keep the waters muddy enough that hopefully they get everybody. But ultimately, I think they're just turning everybody away. Okay. So that's my rant. I guess I'm going to go look at this and see if it's worth posting. I don't know. Politics, as Mel Brooks once said. I will see you next time, hopefully, about screenwriting. Bye.